So it has now been 2 years since I first took delivery of my Model 3, which I am sitting in right now, and it is no longer a brand new car. It's got its fair share of dings, scratches, and just overall wear and tear. So I figured in my 2-year review here, I'm going to go through some of that and how the car has held up long term over these 2 years. So let's start with some specs and just overall kind of what my car is, so you have some precedent of what to expect in this review. I've got the 2020 Model 3 here, but I took delivery in November of 2019, and as of this recording and scripting this video, it's a little over 2 years since I picked it up from the Tesla Service Center in Columbus. And this is the long-range all-wheel drive trim in the midnight silver metallic kind of gray color that Tesla offers. And this is kind of the original Model 3 here. This is prior to any of the upgrades they've been rolling out over the past year. So I've got no heat pump, don't have a heated steering wheel, don't have some of the other new interior features that the brand new Model 3s have. And I also have a little bit less range. So the one I'm sitting in now has a rated range of 310 miles, but obviously the new long range all-wheel drive has around 350, 360 miles. I've driven 25,432 miles, so my average over those 2 years per year is about 12,716 miles, so a little bit less than average in the United States. And the cool thing about Teslas is they actually show you how much energy you've used to go that far as well. So my car is telling me I've used 7,130 kilowatt hours of electricity, and if you do the math, that's actually the equivalent to running a single LED light bulb for over 100 years, which is just crazy to think about, so I'm not sure if that's good or bad either way. The car shows an average efficiency of 280 watt hours per mile, so definitely on the less efficient side. The rated watt hours per mile is around 242, so I'm a little bit over that. Definitely not terrible, but more on the less efficient side. In watt hours per mile, if you don't know, is kind of the MPG for EVs. Some of them will show it in miles per kilowatt hour, but Teslas show it as watt hours per mile, so it's a little bit backwards from miles per gallon or miles per kilowatt hour. And I think this lack of efficiency is just due to my driving style. I don't try to drive super efficiently. I really hammer it if I'm in the car alone. I take corners really hard. I'm accelerating a lot, just having fun with the car, which I think you should do in a safe manner, of course, but I'm definitely not trying to be super efficient, and I also do a lot of highway driving as well. I'm not using this car as a commuter car since I work from home, so most of the miles I'm using on this car are from highway driving, where I'm going long distances, where Teslas and just EVs in general aren't as efficient. And even with all that said, I'm only 15% above the rated efficiency, so I think I'm still doing pretty well given everything considered. And if you're wondering what the car is showing now that I've driven it for 2 years in terms of range, like I said, when I picked it up, I got 310 rated miles of range. However, in the summer, I've seen that go all the way up to almost 320 miles. But then in the winter, it drops back down to like 280. It just changes a lot depending on the weather and exterior temperatures, how you're driving, all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't read too much into that. But in my experience, it has fluctuated a lot with the season. So when the warmer weather is out there, you're going to get a lot more range, whereas right now it's December and it's definitely dropped down into that kind of 280 range. As for charging up and getting that range in the first place, I have had quite the charging journey since I first bought my car. So I initially bought this because I had free charging at my office. We had a whole bank of level 2 chargers there. It was super convenient. Could drive to work, plug in my car. It would have a full charge all the way up by the time I left work, so I didn't have to worry about really charging it till I got to work the next day. It had enough range for any driving I did after work, and generally was enough for any commuting I did over the weekend or any kind of trips I took that were longer distance. I would just plug in again on Monday and it would all be fine. But then, obviously, as many of you know, the pandemic hit and I started working from home 100%. So I instantly lost my charging in March of 2020, which made things very interesting. Luckily, I wasn't driving as much because I wasn't doing that commute into work, but I did find a level 2 charger right across the street from our apartment complex where I could go charge during the day. Luckily, it was over the summer most of the time, and I could just drive over there, plug in, and then come back, work for a few hours, and then just walk back and pick up my car. Wasn't a huge deal, but definitely not the most convenient. And we also had a supercharger that was pretty close to us as well, so we'd take trips over there if we did need a quick fill up. But then in December of last year, actually, we ended up switching apartment complexes, so we were no longer close to that level 2 charger that was right across the street, and supercharging was the only option for filling up this car, which started to get very difficult. I would liken it to about as convenient as gas if you're taking your car to the gas station like once a week. Luckily, the supercharger's right next to a Kroger where we did our grocery shopping, so oftentimes we would just plug in there while we shopped for the half hour or 40 minutes or however long it took us, and then come back to the car and it would be charged up. But that's definitely not very convenient when you're used to home charging or workplace charging. And while that charging was at the grocery store, there were now grocery stores that were close to us, so we were almost kind of driving out of our way to go to this charger and take the extra time to plug in and do all that while we were grocery shopping, whereas it's much easier to just plug in at home and not have to worry about that stuff. Which brings us to now. If you've been following the channel, I finally got a garage at my new apartment complex, and there is a single outlet in there I was able to split off of and attach my mobile adapter to. So that is how I'm charging a majority of the time now. I just use trickle charging in our garage. I have a whole video about that, doing that install or kind of faux install. It's not even really that difficult, but that is on the channel if you want to check that out. And that has been great, honestly. I don't drive that often anymore, so that trickle charging is more than enough for the charging I need to do. And even though it is trickle charging, this has easily been the most convenient. Anytime I come home, I just plug it in the garage, and I don't have to really think about charging anymore. If you're wondering how long that does take to trickle charge, if I were to charge from 0 to 100%, it would likely take over 2 days of my car sitting there plugged in, which obviously is a very long time, but the reality is this isn't what you're doing most of the time. It's usually short trips I've taken, I plug in, and then by the time I go drive my car again, it's back up to 90% or whatever I've set my charge limit at. My fiance has actually been taking my car to work, and we set the charge limit to 90%. She drives to work and back. That drops the battery down to about 75%. And then by the time we plug in overnight and she hops back into the car to go to work the next day, it's back up to 90%. So we're seeing about 15% added overnight, which is more than enough for her commute. And I definitely think it's something that you don't want to overlook if you're just trying to find a charging situation for your home or wherever you're living. So although most of my charging has been at home recently because of that new install we've done, we still do go to superchargers when we're taking long trips. And this is one of the main reasons I went with the Tesla, was just that supercharging experience and just the overall network of Tesla. I was actually looking in my Tesla account, and you can export a whole Excel file of all the charging you've done, how much energy you've used, how much it costs, all that stuff. And I added up and I've charged over 163 times now at superchargers, which is, I feel like, more on the high side, especially because most people are just doing home charging. Over those 163 times, I've had 2 bad experiences. So one time we were traveling over to Indianapolis. We usually stopped at the Dayton supercharger, and there was a power outage actually that knocked out half of the supercharging stations there. Luckily 4 of them were still up, but those were all full. So we had to keep driving, ended up having to stop at like a level 2 charger to kind of limp ourselves along to eventually get to Indianapolis. So that obviously wasn't great, but luckily now they have put another supercharger along that route. So now there's 2 options to charge on that route. There's one in Dayton and now one in Richmond, Indiana, that I stop at a lot. And that has been great, having those 2 options. So if one is either down or full, I can just keep driving to the next one. And the Richmond one is a V3 supercharger as well. So most of our stops there are under 10 minutes, which is just crazy. By the time we walk into Meijer and either grab a bite to eat or go to the bathroom and come back, the car is usually ready to go. The only other bad experience we've had was when we were traveling down to Kentucky, I believe, stopped to charge, and the entire supercharger was full. There was a couple cars waiting, but luckily we didn't have to wait more than, I think, about 5 minutes before we were able to hop in and grab the charger there. So out of all those times supercharging, I have been very impressed with the Tesla network. I think it's definitely the most seamless. Now that I've got the CHAdeMO adapter, I've tried some of these other networks, and they definitely need to improve just the overall charging experience, quite frankly. It needs to be very seamless like Tesla. So that, again, is one of the main reasons I got a Tesla over some other EVs, and I've been very impressed with the supercharger network. Outside of charging, I have had some minor wear and tear that I think just happens with having any car. but let's run through those real quick. So most noticeable is just some of the exterior dings. So I've got a small door ding on my passenger side just from somebody opening their door into my car, and unfortunately Sentry mode was off at the time, so I didn't get to see what happened or what led to that ding. I've also got curb rash on a couple wheels just because I wasn't being as careful as I probably should have and scraped it against a curb one time, and then the other time was just backing into the garage because I wasn't being as attentive as I probably should have been backing in there. Usually the ultrasonic sensors do a good job of estimating where the car is at so that that doesn't happen, but I've noticed when the wheels are turned, it's much harder to estimate like where the edge of the car is. So that's what happened when I was backing into the garage. I had the wheel turned pretty hard, went to back up, and it just scrapes on the edge of the garage. The front end is also accumulating just a lot of little rock chips and paint chips all over the front just from driving the car a lot. Like I said, I do a lot of highway driving, but I also do a lot of back road driving depending on where I'm headed, and that can kick up a lot of gravel or whatever, just crap from the road can hop up and scrape the car. So I've got a lot of tiny little dings up front. I have a lot of people ask me about PPF. Do I regret not getting PPF? Should I get PPF on my new car? I think if it's in your budget, definitely. I think that's it. And if that's something you care about, keeping your car looking nice, I think PPF is certainly the way to go. It does a great job of absorbing a lot of that impact and keeping your car looking nice. But at my point, when I bought the car, it was a brand new car to me. I'd already stretched my budget a lot. I didn't have the additional budget to install that PPF when I first got my car and figured I'd just worry about it later. But also it's a car too, so it kind of depends on how you look at your cars financially. It is a depreciating asset, so it really is just kind of a cosmetic thing. Your car is still going to drive just fine with chips on it or small dents or whatever else like that. It really depends on how much you care about your car looking nice and looking in pristine condition. So if we move on to the interior where I'm sitting right now, this has actually held up the best, I think, out of the entire car. I've been really impressed with how good the interior of this car looks when I do clean it out. It's a little dirty right now, some dust, and I think the main wear in here is just some small scrapes on like the hard plastic pieces, especially if you're getting in and out of the car. Shoes a lot of times can scrape those. The interior's held up really well. The leather's done very well. There are some small creases, but nothing's torn or anything like that, and I've been very, very impressed with the interior. So moving on to maintenance and repairs. Fortunately, I've not had to do a lot with my car. It's held up very well, like I've said, both on the exterior and the interior, and just as a car overall. It is an EV, so there's already off the bat a lot less maintenance to worry about or things that might need just general maintenance. If you watch some of my previous videos, the first repair or maintenance piece I had to do was just some of the interior trim pieces. Just didn't come right from the factory. They were a little bit warped, so I went into or had mobile service come out from Tesla. They were able to adjust those pieces and replace some things and had it looking brand new. So that was no cost to me. That was just a manufacturer issue, and they took care of those. The major maintenance piece that I have missed and just neglected to do is tire rotation, so I've not done that on any of my tires. I've really neglected my tires, quite honestly. I haven't put winter tires on yet, which I probably should have already done, being December in Ohio. I am not been a good car owner in that respect, taking care of the tires. Haven't done tire rotations, and we're still on stock tires right now, so I'll show some shots of the tread on the tires. I think it actually has held up very well, but I'm not sure how evenly it is wearing, because I think that's a major key that rotating of the tires helps with. The last major maintenance piece that I do need to keep up with is the cabin filter. So I'll show some shots of me replacing it here because it is pretty tight. I didn't want to make a whole video out of it, and there's a lot of videos out already that show people replacing the cabin filter. Probably a lot better than I can do. I had to replace that pretty recently. I was starting to get that kind of musty, gross smell in the interior of my Model 3, and that's a common issue with the Model 3, and I believe the Model Y as well, just the way the HVAC is designed. There can be some condensation buildup that causes it to smell really bad on the interior. So I just took care of that replacement myself. I did reach out to Tesla service to see if they would cover it under warranty, and they were not going to do that. So I did spend some money and get some nice HEPA filters, which I've heard can be really good because they are better at filtering the air, but also can be bad because they can limit the airflow just because they're a thicker filter. So I ended up going with the HEPA filters. They've done great so far. I did clean it out when I was doing that, and it's all smelling just fine in here now. One other thing I was worried about just in terms of overall car function was the touchscreen and just how much tech is in this car. If you're familiar with tech products, you know that they don't last very long. I mean, we're replacing our phones every 2 to 3 years now before they get super slow and buggy and you just gotta throw it out or recycle it and get a new one. So I was honestly worried about that getting into a tech-heavy car like that. Thought maybe the touchscreen would start going slow or unresponsive or would have to, some computer part would need replaced or anything like that. But I've been super impressed with how well this computer is held up and just the touchscreen function in general has done. Feels almost as fast as it did the day I picked it up. All the software updates are awesome that are constantly improving things and just making the car better, adding new functionality. So I've been super impressed with that and looking to see how it holds up over the coming years as well, because I know some of those older Model S's, some of those initial Teslas that were built, the touchscreen started failing, just going black randomly, which I'm hoping is not the case with the Model 3 and they were able to fix some of those issues. But other than those couple things, the tires, the cabin filter, and just some of those trim pieces, I have been maintenance free in this car. I haven't had to do any repairs, which I've been very fortunate about. I am glad I got into an EV because I am not somebody that really likes doing car repairs or working on my car. Even just replacing that filter was a pain for me. I'm definitely going to pay somebody to do it next time, even though it's not that hard of a repair. But I'm glad that hopefully down the line that I'm not going to have to do any major repairs. I know with typical gas cars, you're looking at engine or transmission issues or stuff like that down the line. And I'm glad I'm not going to have to deal with that in a car like this. There might be some computer issues, but in terms of just car function and actual driving, I feel like this is going to hold up really well. So let's get into some costs of ownership. I know this is a big question for people that might be looking at a more expensive EV than what they're used to just looking at a typical gas car. I did do a whole breakdown on kind of is cost of ownership cheaper with an EV in a previous video, so I'll have that linked in the description. But the fact of the matter is certain things are cheaper, but other things are more expensive. So for maintenance, for example, the couple parts I listed out were the only maintenance I had to do was just replacing that cabin air filter in 2 years of car ownership. So in a typical gas car, I would have spent a lot on oil changes, maybe some other engine issues. I'm not really sure, honestly, depending on what car you end up purchasing. But I've been very fortunate here. I spent about $100 on the filters I used to replace in my car, which are way more expensive than just the stock Tesla filters, so you can definitely get them cheaper. And I've also spent $15 on the cleaner to clean out the HVAC system. So that's really been the major maintenance item I've had. So in 2 years of ownership, only spending about $115 is really not bad at all. Definitely would have been much higher in a gas car. As for charging costs, I really hesitate to get into this because my situation is so unique. The first 6 months or so of me owning my car, I was able to have free charging at work. So that cost was zero for me for those initial charging. And then when we moved and were working from home, got free charging across the street at that level 2 charger, so free charging there. And I now have free charging in my garage because I only pay for the garage rental fee. I don't pay for electricity in the garage. So charging is free there as well. I also have a lot of referral miles, so I don't pay for like any supercharging anymore. So that charging is free. Lots of free charging for me. I definitely try to seek it out if I can, but I also go test chargers a lot. And in my experience, charging at home is definitely going to be the cheapest because you're essentially just paying your local electricity rate. So you're able to do the math on that. As for charging out in public, I've found a lot of public level 2 chargers that are free because businesses are trying to attract EV drivers and add that as an incentive for them. But outside of that, I've seen charging costs at level 2 stations at least cost anywhere from $1 to $2 per hour. I don't think I've ever seen more than $2 per hour. That's been my experience there. As for fast charging or supercharging, I think the average for Tesla is about 26 cents per kilowatt hour, and prior to getting all my referral miles, it usually costs about anywhere from $7 to $10 to charge up when I plugged in. But again, this isn't charging up from 0 to 100%. When you're on road trips, you're usually only charging enough to get to your destination or get to the next supercharger. So Most of those stops are usually $7 to $10, but it could be more or less depending on how much charge you do need. I did pick up a CHAdeMO adapter as well for my travels. I do like testing out other non-Tesla chargers, so picked up that charging adapter for $430, so that was an additional cost for me that I kind of put into the bucket of car ownership costs. And when I use that CHAdeMO adapter and charge on public stations, it's usually about $10 per hour for fast charging, which kind of is in line with the Tesla charging if you think about it. That would be about $5 for a half-hour charge on these non-Tesla stations. So, but overall, I have spent a minimal amount of charging compared to what I was spending on gas. I think when I was budgeting out with my old car, it was around $200 per month just to fuel my car, which I thought was ridiculous. Granted, I was using premium gas in my old car, and it wasn't very efficient, but switching to an EV is just a game changer, quite honestly, in terms of just overall fueling and upkeep. Costs are just so much lower. So definitely, if you're trying to save money on the fueling side, if that's really a big pain for you, if you're in a gas vehicle, switching to electric is definitely the way to go. Insurance was another question I had a lot of people ask about. How much does insurance cost with your Tesla? Again, I'm hesitant to talk about this because insurance is so subjective depending on what kind of driver you are, how old you are, have you had previous accidents, what car do you drive, how much is your net worth? Like, all of these things factor into car insurance. But I will give those numbers just because a lot of people are curious about it. So when I first bought my car, I was with MetLife from October 2020 to April 2021. I was paying $526 per 6 months for 100, 300, 100 coverage. Then in April of 2021, I switched to Root and stayed with them for 6 months, and that was $601 for the same coverage, 100, 300, 100. And in October recently, I switched to Allstate, and I'm now paying $515 per 6 months. So it kind of hovered in that $500 to $600 range per 6 months, so roughly $100 per month if you want to look at it that way. But again, with insurance, you can adjust certain things and make your rates go up or down depending on what kind of coverage you need. Other upgrades I've gotten: last September, I actually upgraded to enhanced autopilot on this car. So when I bought it, basic autopilot was included, like it is with all new Teslas, but I wanted some of the additional features, but didn't want to quite spring for the $8,000 full self-driving is what it cost at the time. Tesla ran this special on enhanced autopilot, and I really hope they bring it back because it's got a lot of nice features. Purchased that for $4,000 and got kind of all of the usable features of full self-driving, is like what I like to call it. So I've now got auto lane change, I've got navigate on autopilot, I've got the summon features, a lot of the usable parts and the highway features of full self-driving I now have, which is super nice. Don't have the full self-driving, so I'm not eligible for beta. I don't have some of the city driving aspects that might come with full self-driving, but honestly, I'm okay with that. I think enhanced autopilot really splits the difference very well. As for autopilot as a whole, that is something a lot of people ask me about. Should I spring for full self-driving? Should I stick with just basic autopilot? I've got a whole video breaking that down as well, but personally, I think just basic autopilot gets the job done a lot better than any other driving tool you've probably used in the past. So I think just basic autopilot is more than enough for most people. If you want to be on that bleeding edge, you can get full self-driving, but for a lot of people, I don't think that 10 grand price is really worth it. In terms of autopilot functionality, I was going to do a full breakdown into this, but I'll probably just kind of keep it short here and do a full in-depth video of kind of my review of autopilot. So the main things I've noticed is it is overall just gotten a lot smoother. It used to be very jerky, just like going around turns, especially when I first got my car. And now it's very smooth going around curves and just taking general turns and stuff on the highway, changing lanes, all that kind of stuff. But a lot of things have also just stayed the same and haven't improved or even gotten worse in some cases. So phantom braking is a big one. This just happens randomly. You can usually kind of estimate when it's going to happen, especially if you're on a 2-lane road. Some of those country roads I've used autopilot on, there's a semi coming the other way. It phantom brakes almost every time because it thinks that semi is coming right at you. And then going under overpasses and bridges and stuff like that, phantom braking happens a lot. So that's my main kind of issue with autopilot right now, is the phantom braking. But you are able to override that if you keep your foot on the accelerator. So I'm always kind of like watching for that, so that if it does start to happen, I can accelerate and kind of push through that phantom braking. The other part that just has not improved since I got enhanced autopilot is taking exits. I'll show some video here of me driving, but when it takes exits, I don't know if it's because the camera can't see everywhere, but it'll swerve like hard to the right and it'll swerve hard to the left to like recenter in that exit lane after it takes it. So I think that can definitely be improved, and just autopilot as a whole I think needs improved on the highway side of things, because that's when people use it the most often. And honestly, it's most helpful then on the highway. I think in city driving, that's a lot harder to figure out, and most people are going to take over at that point anyway. So just doing most of the highway driving for me has been a dream, and definitely recommend just sticking with regular autopilot, because it does the majority of the work for you. So to wrap up here, that's kind of my review, but I did have some additional questions that didn't really fit into any category that I wanted to touch on. So how's the screen been holding up? Is it glitching at all? I have had a few issues where the screen will just go black and then come back on a couple seconds later. I'm not sure if it's just kind of refreshing the screen or what's going on there, but I have had that happen a couple times. I believe it's happened like once when I was driving, but it immediately came back on and wasn't an issue. My car kept driving. It was on autopilot and just kept staying on autopilot. Just know that the screen going black doesn't mean the entire car is shut down. The screen is run by a different computer than everything else. So just because the screen is off doesn't always mean that your car is off, if that makes sense. What is the trade-in value in this crazy used market? So I actually reached out to Carvana to see what my car would be worth if I traded it in, and they gave me an appraisal of $48,917. So when I picked up my car and bought it, it was $48,990. So only a small drop there. Granted, I did have enhanced autopilot added, so that should be like an additional $4,000 on the value of the car. But yeah, it's been insane how crazy these used prices are right now. I had thought about trading in my car, just like trading up to the new version of the Model 3, but I really do like enhanced autopilot, and I don't want to spring for the full self-driving. So if I did trade in, I would end up losing money still, which I don't want to do. I've got equity in the car, and I want to keep that. Would you buy again, and what would you do differently? I think to wrap up here, this is a good question to end on. Yes, I would definitely buy this car again. If I was looking at a new Model 3, I think I would get the exact same trim. I'd get the long range all-wheel drive. You're getting the most range. I think you're getting the most value for your money at that point. I know I personally need over 300 miles of range. The long range all-wheel drive now has 350 plus miles of range, which is awesome. And yeah, I've really enjoyed the car. I don't think I would have really done much differently personally. And the biggest knock I hear from people that are looking to get into a Tesla is the build quality. That's like always what gets brought up about Teslas. And honestly, I've noticed a few things here and there that are like maybe could have been done a little bit better, but coming from my old car, it's significantly better. It's a much nicer car. And if you're switching from anything that's older, it's going to be a much better upgrade than it was in the past. And honestly, when I bought a Tesla, you're kind of buying into an ecosystem more than you're just buying a car. So I think that's really important with EVs and just cars in general, is kind of the overall experience. So being a tech guy, liking technology, Tesla ecosystem just does a lot smarter stuff than most other car brands I've seen. Even new EVs coming out, it's like, oh, well, my Tesla has that feature, this car doesn't have that feature. So it's been interesting to see these new EVs coming out and how they're handling that. I think there's a lot of good competition coming, which is super exciting, because competition is going to help all of these cars improve as a whole. So I'm really excited for the future of EVs. I still think Tesla's very much towards the front right now, and definitely what I'm recommending #1 to people right now if they like this minimalist kind of overall Tesla ecosystem. It's definitely, I think, one of the best cars out there right now. And like I said, it is not perfect, but it does a lot of things right. I think it checks a lot of boxes. It meets my requirements for a car very well. And honestly, this was my dream car coming out of high school and college. I had seen the Model S and had always wanted a Tesla vehicle. They just really piqued my interest, and here we are sitting in it right now. I've enjoyed it for 2 years. It's held up very well. I'm excited to see what the future holds for Tesla and this car as well. So thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, definitely hit that like button. Subscribe for more Tesla videos. I also have a lot more car videos coming next year, so stay tuned for that. And if you have any questions about just the 2-year Tesla ownership that I didn't cover here, definitely let me know down in the comments below. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you in the next video.